Welcome in this Monday night edition of Talkin' Ball. My name is Jerry Hamilton, joined by Bobby Burton as always. Well, it's kind of a big week in Austin. Formula One racing's in town and M&M's in town, and it's number 1 versus number 5. It's Steve Sarkisian versus Kirby Smart. First matchup as head coaches between those two guys. And based on Bobby, both coaches took to the mic today, so we'll talk about that. Steve Sarkisian and Kirby Smart. I think you listen to Sark, I listen to Kirby because they're kind of going on about the same time with a few minutes of each other. Main thing tonight, we're going to take your questions. Throw out the questions. We'll answer as many questions as we can, the best we possibly can. James Falata, looking from Long Beach, California. I'm already jealous. So we'll get that out of the way. I bet the weather's nice there. Even though we got some cooler weather coming to Texas here. It's going to be great weather Saturday in Austin. But before we get going tonight, I want to thank our sponsor. That is John Donovan in Longhorn Wealth Management. John is a certified financial planner who spent over 30 years providing investment, retirement, and insurance and estate planning services and solutions to Longhorn families and friends across the nation, coast to coast. John looks forward to celebrating the Longhorns' continued consensus #1 ranking with OTF fans at the tailgate this Saturday in Austin prior to the top 5 matchup versus the Georgia Bulldogs, and wants to offer a free 30-minute consultation to all OTF fans to explore how Longhorn Wealth can help you maximize your wealth, minimize your taxes, and secure that legacy. So simply call John and his Longhorn Wealth team at 972-707-4900 or go online at www.longhornwealth.net to secure your free consultation. All right, Bobby, let's get rolling. Zane Petty, I got yours, but I need the rest of that question. Bobby, thoughts, I guess, for initial thoughts on what Sark had to say today. Obviously, the news of the day was Derrick Williams is out for the season. And that's a significant loss because I think he's their best alley cat run force defender at safety and most physical safety in the run game. So kind of your thoughts on what Sark had to say in the Derrick Williams news, which I think we all pretty much knew was coming.
Yeah, I think that I'll go over the injury stuff first. Of course, he said that Derrick Williams is out for the season and will have surgery in a couple of weeks. That means to me that it's probably an ACL that they're going to let the swelling go down a little bit before they get in there and poke around, right? That's that one. And then Isaiah Bond, he said on Saturday he was really concerned about it. Obviously couldn't finish the game, but every day since, including today, he felt better about Isaiah Bond and saying it's day to day right now for him. All right, outside of that, what did Steve Sarkisian talk about? He really harped on culture a lot today. I thought that talking about Silas Bolden and how he's bought in and brought some culture to Texas as well. It's not just all what Texas has done. It's what the players do for themselves as well. Thought that was really good from Sark. And then he talked about Georgia, Jerry, being the gold standard for college football the last half dozen years. And so he was really, really complimentary of not only Kirby Smart, but also of Glenn Schumann, the defense coordinator, and Will Muschamp. He said those three together may be 3 of the brightest minds in college football from a defensive perspective. All in all, he said he's excited about this week, happy to get through Oklahoma, and excited about how the team performed there in many ways, and just ready to move forward with this week of practice. Longhorns get back after it again tomorrow morning.
Yeah, and I listened to Kirby Smart, Georgia press conference. You know, it's kind of interesting, man. Not a lot of questions taken at that press conference, but he gave Sark a lot of compliments on saying they're the best football team they've played this year, most complete football team they've played this year. Then he laid it on thick and said in many years he's going to try to get his team motivated right there. Obviously, the master of coach speaker at it. And I'm not mean Sark, I mean Kirby right now. He needs his team to play the best game they have all year, and he does know that. But he didn't really say a lot on the injuries. They asked about Mykel Williams, which is what I really tuned in for. Mykel Williams doesn't practice much all week, and he's the edge player, defensive lineman. It was projected to be a first rounder before the season. And so people were asking Kirby, you know, where's Mykel Williams? That's hard to say. He doesn't do much all week. Then we just got to see how he is on Saturday. I think he played 8 plays and 12 plays the last couple of weeks. Obviously, they'd love for that number to get up into the 30s. I really wanted to see what he's going to say about Jared Wilson, the starting center who's missed the last couple of games. You know, Tate Ratledge is out. probably until the Florida game. But Jared Wilson is their starting center. He's a high-level center. And even though they lost their center last year, they actually thought Jared Wilson is a tremendous player. And Drew Bobo, Coach Bobo's son's been filling in for him the last couple of weeks admirably. But I was really checking to see if Jared Wilson was going to play as well. And we didn't get many answers. Smell Mondon, of course. We know the running back Branson Robinson's out, which means it's more of ETN plus Nathan Frazier this week, who's a Jet, who's a very, very good young player with a running back body type that ran 10.55 in high school. May end up being one of the gems of that 2024 recruiting class for Georgia. But outside of that, it was complimentary to Steve Sarkisian, what they do offensively, the program he's built in Austin. Really was complimentary of this Texas team and the task at hand they have going in. So will be interesting to see there. Bobby, my takeaway from this, and we're about to get to you guys' questions, is if Texas doesn't get Georgia's absolute best shot of the season Saturday, then something's going on at Georgia a little bit. They're not the same. If they can't bring their best Saturday that they have all year, already having a loss, not having much margin for error left to get in the playoff, if they don't bring their absolute best Saturday, Georgia's maybe the off-field stuff's getting to them a little bit, because this is the game they played a close game against Kentucky. They had the loss against Bama. They did not play well defensively against Mississippi State late in that game. This should be their best game of the season if it's the same Georgia.
Yeah, I think either team that doesn't bring their best is going to lose, whether that's Georgia or Texas. And whether that tells you something extra about Georgia and what's been going on there off the field, and whether it's seeped over into the actual locker room, I'm not so sure, because I don't cover them every day, Jerry. I'd have a better feel if we were talking about Texas there. I think that if Texas or Georgia, either one, do not bring their A game, they're not winning. Whoever doesn't do that, not going to win this game, because one of these two teams are too good when they're on to actually beat. I mean, they're both really, really talented.
Yeah.
I heard Steve Sarkisian say that Georgia's offense mirrors his in many ways, and I believe it and agree with it. They're very fast on the outside. They've got fast running backs. They've got a talented, experienced starter at quarterback. They've got good tight ends. They've got a great offensive line. Georgia can go score points with just about anybody, and they can score them in bunches. A lot of people are saying, well, they don't have that great offense. Look at the Kentucky game. Well, yeah, Kentucky held them, but guess what? They were down 28-0 at one point to Alabama and roared back almost all of it in the second half, right? They beat Clemson and them went basically tied into halftime, and then they just had a third quarter onslaught against maybe the ACC's best defense. So don't tell me that Georgia can't score in bunches or something like that. So I think either team and either side of the ball, either offense or defense for either team, doesn't come with their best on Saturday, that's a recipe for a loss. Period. That's why it's important. Quinn Ewers has a great game, a bounce-back game. It's why the Texas secondary is going to be tested for the first time this year, I think. A lot of things. We'll find out a lot of things, not only about Georgia, but we'll find out some things about Texas too.
Well, yeah, and we're gonna take your questions. I think the interesting thing will be Texas was down for the first time all season, 3-0 to Oklahoma. And I was on a different show today, and I said, look, the one thing they asked me what Texas hasn't happened to Texas this year that could potentially happen in the Georgia game. I said they could get down 2 scores and have to respond to adversity. If somebody gets off to a fast start and maybe they hit you on a deep play, maybe get a turnover, something like that. I said that's the one thing this team we think will respond to it, but they haven't faced it yet this year. So we'll see. It's going to be an interesting game. Early turnovers are going to be big, I think, in momentum there. Let's get to your questions. Daniel, what position is Jahdae Barron going to play in the NFL? I think
depending on how well he runs, Jerry, he's a safety.
I agree.
I just don't think he runs well enough to be a corner in the NFL. But I think he's got the headiness and smarts and is willing to be physical enough to play safety. maybe nickel, but again, that requires a lot of just straight line speed that I don't know he has.
Yeah. Yeah. Ekim following up on that with the injury to Derrick Williams. Does Barron or McDonald take more snaps at safety with Williams out? I think they're going to leave Barron at corner. I think Jelani McDonald, and I think you're going to see Jordan Johnson-Rebel get meaningful snaps this season. I think that's where we're at. I mean, but Jelani McDonald also plays some at nickel. He plays some of those snaps at nickel. So it'll be interesting how much Jordan Johnson-Rebel, Bobby, actually plays at safety moving forward for the Horns.
Well, what's crazy, I mean, I didn't know this until CJ pointed it out on Sunday. Jelani McDonald had more snaps against OU than Andrew Makuba.
Yeah.
I mean, that's significant. And it gives you an idea of what they're thinking with Jelani McDonald, because I think he's a guy that's better against the run. He's bigger guy, right? And that's what they wanted out of that safety position. Derrick Williams, bigger guy, right, against the run. I don't see Barron getting typical safety snaps. They might use him or actually put him at nickel and move Gilbo to the third safety if they play a 3-high look. They wouldn't necessarily move Barron to safety. They would move Gilbo into that 3-high look. So more snaps, it's definitely going to be McDonald at safety.
William Niche, will Texas blitz more against Georgia? I think that's twofold. I think one, early in the game, what does Texas front look like against Georgia's offensive line? Because
can they get pressure?
Yeah, if you get pressure without, you're not. I mean, you'll occasionally will. But Carson Beck, under pressure this year, has thrown interceptions. So if you don't try to pressure him, you're kind of missing the boat.
He's thrown interceptions without pressure.
Yeah.
I mean, a little bit like Quinn, to be honest. I mean, they're having very similar seasons in many respects. Beck's
thrown a lot more picks, but yeah.
Yeah, but Beck hasn't been injured.
Yeah.
I would say this. I think that they're going to have to blitz a little bit more. And a lot of it at times, Jerry, may even be run blitz. I mean, because Georgia's got some big boys up front. Tech's going to have to take some chances more than they do normally or typically or have all year against this Georgia offense. They're just going to have to. Georgia has too many talented players to sit back and just let it happen to them.
Yeah. MJF, great question. With Georgia already having one loss already and treating this game as a desperate must-win, Horns coming off an emotional OU rival, do you think Georgia will be a hungrier team? Look, I don't. I think it's a really good topic. I don't, because I think Texas has become big game hunters after last year, the win at Alabama, winning the Big 12 championship, making the playoff, coming in this year. I think the most difficult thing for Sark was getting Texas to play at a high level against UTSA, UL Monroe, and Mississippi State back to back to back after the Michigan game, before the Oklahoma and Georgia games. I think Texas is going to be sky high. I think they're going to be emotionally fired up. I got to remember this. And as much as important as the Texas OU game is to the Texas fan base, a lot of these kids want Georgia. I mean, just think about where we're at in college football. Georgia's been the top program. A lot of these kids visited Georgia before they visited Oklahoma. And if they were given a chance, which school will you take a visit to? 90% of them want to pick Georgia. This is the games. These kids grew up watching LSU, Bama, Georgia. That's what they grew up watching in the SEC dominate college football. This Georgia game has these kids fired up. Now, I'll say this. If Texas doesn't get Georgia, and I'm a broken record on this, if Texas doesn't get Georgia's best game of the year, they got some issues in Athens, because this should be Georgia's best game of the year. Their backs are against the wall. They had some busts and didn't play well defensively against Mississippi State. They know they have to get off to a fast start because Alabama caught them in empty and got where they were up 37. Everything that has happened to Georgia this year should tell people that Georgia's going to come out and play their best game. If they don't, something to watch the rest of the season.
I'm of the opinion right now, Jerry. I gotta say this: either team doesn't have their game, it's just gonna spell disaster. I would have a hard time believing that both teams don't play well on Saturday. To your point, and what I mean by that is it is a big game for Georgia. It is a huge game for Texas. I think the Texas players are, you used this term earlier, a big game hunter. They like the big games. So I think both teams are actually going to play well at times on Saturday. Who can sustain that the longest is going to win.
MJF asked, can Derrick Williams get medical red shirt? I think it's too late for that technically.
No, it's not. No, it's not, because he played 4 games.
Yeah, he missed 2 before it. So yes, he could.
Yeah.
He could. Let's see. Super chat here from Rapid Calm. Perhaps my favorite aspect of the Sark era so far has been the emphasis on recruiting the DFW area. Those guys are making plays all over the field. Absolutely. We touched on that in Rapid Reactions Sunday morning after the Texas OU game. Anthony Hill, Colin Simmons, Cam Williams, going to be a first-round pick. I'm calling it now. He's one more good game away from just being a lock at this point unless he gets injured. But Cam Williams, you just keep going down. DJ Campbell. DFW recruiting, so impactful. And now that is you're talking about Texas OU. Those kids, DJ Campbell came down to Texas OU. Cam Williams was committed to Oregon, but Texas and Oklahoma were on that list. Colin Simmons was going to play in the SEC. That was Texas or LSU. But still, there's that Texas, Oklahoma registers more in DFW than anywhere else. And those are huge recruiting wins. And these DFW guys continue, Trey Wisner, to produce an incredibly high level. Not every guy is, but the Texas guys that they've won in those recruitments, key recruitments in DFW, they're not just becoming good players, but Anthony Hill may become an All-American this year. Colin Simmons looks like he could be a future All-American. Cam Williams looks like he may be a first-round pick. The right side of the offensive line from center guard tackle is DFW guys, Jake Majors, DJ Campbell, and Cam Williams. So the DFW area, Sark, Jeff Banks, Chris Gilbert. Jeff Banks' idea to hire Chris Gilbert was a shrewd one. They made it an emphasis, and they won some big battles. All right, let's see. My next question is Nicholas Thompson with a super chat. Thank you very much, Nicholas. Georgia looks like they stretch plays to the boundary early and often the tire teams out. Would that work on Texas? Are we too deep? Thanks for the great content.
Dude, that's like Texas did to Michigan. And that, Nicholas, you're right. That's exactly what Georgia did to Mississippi State on Saturday. I watched that game, guys, and they definitely do try to use their wide receivers as an extension of the run game. And, man, they've got some fast guys right now. Anthony Evans, the Smith kid, Dylan Bell's a really effective runner as well at times. They've got a group of offensive skill talent that's as good as Texas will see from anybody, if not better. Actually, it is the best group of skill talent Texas will see this year because they're not seeing Ole Miss. They're not seeing who's the other one in the SEC. They're not seeing Alabama.
Yeah,
in that group. It's the best collection of skill talent Texas will see.
Yeah, even with 2 of the top 4 receivers gone.
Even with
that. Let's see. Good one here from Scott B. What if Georgia doesn't get Texas' best shot? What will that say about Texas? I think Georgia's going to get Texas' best shot. That doesn't mean either of these teams play great, but there could be mistakes happen because these are high-level athletes. I don't worry about Texas not giving Georgia their best shot. I think it's going to be an electric atmosphere. Like I said earlier, I think these kids have been fired up for this game because in recruiting, this game is this game's a big deal to a lot of these kids. I mean, and you think about an Isaiah Bond from Buford. You think about the recruits in the stands Texas is bringing in from the state of Georgia. But the Texas players, they're going to give Georgia their best shot. That doesn't mean either teams are going to play perfect, but they're going to get their best shot. All right, we have a super chat here from Smartin one. Can you confirm, guys? Confirm Bevo is asking the CUGA pregame, UGA pregame. Just say howdy, just to say howdy.
I love it.
It is a new UGA. Obviously, the UGA from 2018 passed away. So I don't know what number this UGA is. I don't keep up with the numbers. Yeah,
I love stuff like that because that's one of what's so funny is that is one of the more memorable memories of that Sugar Bowl, right? I think that's kind of the funny part of it. That's the one that made headlines that day after Bevo went after the dog, but they're saying it was the camera, etc. Look, we'll see if UGA is part of this. Hey, this one from Kyle Vachoska. I think if Texas plays their game and doesn't make mistakes, they will win. Jerry, do you agree with that? Is a mistake-free game what Texas has to do and stay within themselves? Because I don't know that either team's going to be perfect.
No, there's too many good athletes. There's too many good athletes running around the field. Somebody's going to put a helmet or shoulder pad on a football, even if you have two hands over it. That's what happens when – it's like the play Derrick Williams made against Taylor Tatum Saturday in the Cotton Bowl. Taylor Tatum did everything right as a running back. Everything perfectly right. Derrick Williams just was a foot off the ground and knifed under a running back that had dropped his pads and knees and covered the ball. These guys are going to make plays. Something's going to happen. It's not always the player's fault. Sometimes you got to tip your hat. So but there's going to be things like that happen. There's too many talented athletes, fast athletes on the field. But I will say this. If Texas is even in the turnover battle, Bobby, and they get 4 trips in the red zone, I think they win the game.
Got to score touchdowns instead of field goals. That's going to be a key when Texas reverted a little bit against OU on Saturday and did not always finish drives with touchdowns. That's going to be something that gets bigger and more important as we get to the back half of this schedule against the SEC.
Aloha, Travis. You see Kirby's comments about how he thinks this Texas team reminds him of some of the great Texas teams. If Ewers plays like that did last week, Texas loses. He needs to bring his A game. I will have another comment on that coming up. We'll talk about that with Kenneth Cassidy's comment. I don't know. Look, I don't think this team reminds me of 05. I'll say that. I think they're much different teams. I don't think that team had an unbelievable talented secondary. That team had the super freak at quarterback. That team didn't have high-level wide receivers like this team does. I think David Thomas and Gunnar Helm have become very comparable in different ways. Offensive line, comparable.
Definitely comparable.
Comparable. Defense. Texas has better linebackers on this team.
They don't have the secondary. They have a good communication secondary. I would counter that they don't have they may have better defensive tackles on this team than the national championship team did in 05.
Yeah.
That was not a strength of that team, even though it was Frank Oakham and Rod Wright and Larry Dibbles and those guys. I'm not so sure this group of defensive tackles overall is better.
I agree.
Texas had tremendous edges.
Yeah.
Brian Robeson, Tim Crowder.
And then was a freshman.
Yeah, and then they had some tremendous guys in the secondary. They had 5 NFL players roaming the secondary and really shutting down or limiting teams, even like USC that year. I think that it is a different team. That team was more dominating because they had that singular dominating player in Vince Young. That was, he was the best player in college football,
right?
For not just that year, but for a few years. Yeah. Not him personally, but he was the most dominating player in college football of about a 5-year span, right? He was the guy that everybody looked to. I'm not a big believer in comparing those kind of guys, but it's important.
Kenneth Cassidy, kind of follow up on the last one. Bobby and Jerry, do you agree with this statement? If Quinn plays at least a B+ game, Texas will win. Anything less ends up a loss.
No, I don't agree with that. Quinn needs an A game. for Texas to win. I mean, look, the window, the margin for error in this is freaking thin. You're playing a top 5 ranked team. They've lost one regular season game in the last 3 years. I mean, no.
I actually agree with him. I say B plus. Yes, if a B plus is no turnovers. No. I mean, they're not playing Cam Newton or Vince Young on the other sideline.
No, but they've got to score 35.
I don't know. We'll see.
Oh, Texas has to score 35 in this game.
We'll see.
No doubt about it. I think I saw the over at like 50 something or whatever. You better be taking 30. The game, it's going to be a high scoring game in my opinion.
Jane Petty here. Sorry. If you could pick 3 recruits coming in this weekend that we could land regardless of the class, who are you taking? Yeah, that one's actually pretty easy for me. Joseph Mbaktu, Kevin Wynn, and Walter Mathis.
All 3 defensive linemen. just finish up.
And from Georgia, because that probably means you won the game.
I like that. I like that qualifier at the end there.
No, but seriously, 2 of those guys plus John Turntine in 2026.
Okay.
I think Turntine is an unbelievable culture fit, tremendous talent. I don't care what position he plays on the Texas offensive line. I think he is a dynamite prospect and would fit like a glove in what Steve Sarkisian's built as a 5-star prospect. All right, Katie, I'm the best, 35. Hey, look, Tyler Atkinson. Yeah, Tyler Atkinson looked as good a linebacking prospect as there is in the country. There's no doubt. Be a 25-star from Grayson, the junior at Grayson. A lot of those kids, by the way, were at USC last weekend, and those Georgia kids are going to be here this weekend. That was Tyler Atkinson. Bryce Perry Wright told me he's coming in. He's the 4-star plus edge D lineman out of Buford. He's coming in. Obviously, there's a number of other guys that were at USC that I think last weekend for USC's big game against Penn State loss, but big game from a recruiting standpoint. I think there's going to be a few guys that were at that game last weekend that are going to be in Austin this weekend. But Tyler Atkinson, great player. I think he's a tremendous prospect. Jose Rodriguez here, super chat. Bobby and Jerry, what do we need to look out for on offense and defense for Georgia? Also, how does UT manage the favoritism this week? I think you meant on the recruiting trail. I think before we get to the first part of the question, I think the game visits are so much different than a weekend official visit. That doesn't really, there's so many kids at these games. A lot of them just come in for the game. They drive in, they park, they shuttle over for the game. They leave after the game. That's much different on a game day versus an official visit weekend where if 1 or 2 kids get a bulk of the attention and some other families notice it, that becomes an issue. I don't think it's like that for game visits. That's more to showcase what your university has. They know going in there, the Steve Sarkisian's not going to have time to sit down and talk with all these guys around this game. It's more to be here, be on the field before the game. The assistant coaches, they all come up, say hello. Brandon Harris, J.M. Jones, they all do their thing. It's much different than official visit weekend. Things to look out for offense and defense for Georgia. Bobby, I think one thing Georgia has multiple tight ends that they can get involved in the game. That's one thing Texas hasn't faced. Michigan had Colston Loveland, and you knew if you took him out, what did Michigan have at wide out? Georgia has multiple tight ends they get involved in the passing game. So that's going to be something new for the Texas defense that they haven't faced. I'm thinking of something they haven't seen this year.
Yeah, there's a lot. They haven't seen receivers like this. They haven't seen tight ends. They haven't seen a quarterback. They haven't seen running backs. This is the best group of running backs Texas will face. They're better than the Michigan group, in my opinion, because Donovan Edwards is not that good. The other running back for Michigan is much better. So I feel like this is the best offense overall. And, add on top of that, it's the best offensive line Texas has faced. So you asked me what they need to look out for. I think they need to look out for an explosive offense from Georgia. On defense, Georgia has not gotten after the passer like we've seen them get after the passer previously. Okay, so what does that mean, Jerry? I'm really not going to give you a name of a person for Georgia. I want to see how Texas holds up in pass protection. So if Texas can hold up in pass protection, I think Texas is going to be fine on offense. I don't know if it'll be enough to win, but I think they'll be fine. That's kind of a couple of the keys that I'm looking for.
I would say this to add on that. I do think it's kind of proven out. Mississippi State actually has some speed at wideout. Sark kind of talked about that before. So I think they've seen a similar speed because Georgia's just not what they were. Ra Thomas gone, and their red zone guy Colby Young's gone. So I don't think the speed's going to overwhelm them.
I think they're faster than Mississippi State. I'll just tell you, based on what I saw on Saturday.
And the other thing I would say is see what Georgia, how they play Jalen Walker. Jalen Walker is the best pass rusher. He's one of the best in the country, but Georgia plays him at inside backer a lot. He wears number 11. See if they move him around more against Texas because he is their best pass rusher. And that will be telling to me with what Georgia's thoughts are. If you start to see Jalen Walker move from the middle to the edge in this game, then you'll know Georgia doesn't think their regular front can get pressure because they ideally have played Jalen Walker at middle backer so much more this year. Lane C. Wright, super chat. Does Beck pose a dual threat? Not necessarily Gabriel Lever, but you have to spy him. I don't think you have to spy Carson Beck. I'll tell you the one thing to watch with Carson Beck that I've noticed is he's a pocket guy all the way. There's a lot of guys. So you go with your really quick release guys, your Arch Mannings, those guys. The ball is quick going back and through the same. One thing to watch with Carson Beck, and go watch, go pull up the YouTube highlights of them versus Alabama or them versus Mississippi State. One thing to watch with Carson Beck, he takes the ball back slower than he does when it's through release. I think what he sees with his eyes at times, he's a split second late getting the ball out because he's a little slower taking the ball back than he is whipping through it. Just something to follow with Carson Beck, something I've seen on tape with him a couple of times that we'll see. But no, you don't have to treat him like a dual threat. Jeff Carey, did we get a super chat from Jeff Carey? If we did, I don't see it. Somebody's asking, I was trying to find this question because I thought it was a good one. How many, CB Clark, how many opponents' QBs have been injured in their Georgia game this season?
I have no clue about that.
Jalen Milroe has not. Obviously, I think if you're talking about Mississippi State, Van Buren's first start was against Texas. Will that make it a second start against
he wasn't injured.
Georgia? And I don't know if you mean starting quarterback.
Klubnik wasn't injured against Georgia. I don't know.
Kentucky, no. No. I mean, that's pretty much that's pretty much it right there. There's a question here.
Hey Jerry, this is Jeff Carey, the reference he was making. Golden QB4.
Oh, that's hilarious. Yeah, I mean, they put something on tape. But I can tell you this. Either one of those passes against Georgia, Malachi Starks is picking it off. That's the difference with the first-team All-American safety back there. Either one of those passes against Georgia is picked off by Malachi Starks if he's in the area code. Brandon asked, and this is what I was going to follow up with. What happened to Xavier Filsaime? Is Filsaime hurt or still behind? Is that a little bit of an injury issue, Bobby? And we'll see beyond that.
Yeah, I mean, right now, Jordan Johnson-Rubel is clearly ahead of him. I mean, Jordan Johnson-Rubel, I think, played 17 plays on Saturday.
Yeah.
And Filsaime did not play. And he's healthy. And he's back healthy now. He's not on the injury report at all, Jerry. He's just ahead.
There's a question up here to Stephen Houston. Mississippi State had some bombs they were throwing against Georgia, multiple. And I agree with this. Kirby did talk about his corners today and his secondary today. They're not as sound or winning one-on-ones to the level they have the previous 3 years in the secondary. Malachi Starks is a great football player, but around him at corner, look, those guys are really good players that are in the NFL. They're not as talented at corner, not as productive at corner as they were the last 3 years. And Mississippi State did get behind them multiple times. Now, Mississippi State guys can roll, but they did get behind them multiple times and also had a coverage bust in there. That's going to be a point of emphasis, with Georgia this week with Schumann, Kirby, Muschamp when he's in the building, is to get that secondary shored up best way possible heading into Saturday. But now, Bobby, the interesting thing about that is, do they take more risks against Texas and see if Quinn hits deep balls on them early in the game?
Maybe so. Maybe see if he has his timing down. They have to. I think Texas is going to throw more RPO at Georgia. I really believe that. They're going to need to. And Quinn better be ready. But you got to get Ryan Wingo going in this game. You got to get your outside receivers like Isaiah Bond if he's healthy in this game. You need to get the ball to some guys that can challenge Georgia, and make them pay if they overdo that. Right? If you give Ryan Wingo a chance to go one-on-one, he's got a chance to take it to the house. Same with Isaiah Bond. Those are the type of guys that will get Georgia not to play that aggressive style of defense, Jerry.
Yeah.
And then you can perhaps establish run, short passing game, etc.
E. Kim, great question. High ranked at the end of the season, Texas team rank or recruiting class rank?
I hope Texas team rank.
So
I don't even care where they come in and recruiting it if they're number one in team. That recruiting will take care of itself at that point.
Yeah, I think Texas is going to finish with a top 3 class. So to answer your question for the chat, depends on if Texas has 0 or 1 losses. That's kind of the whole thing right there. Let's see. And Jose Rodriguez, I don't think Georgia will fear Ewers deep ball. He hasn't hit one this season. Look, it's kind of like, and I think because Quinn is so tremendous in the intermediate game. If I was Georgia, I'd bring more pressure on him early and say, all right, hit one. Hit one on the right sideline. Here's my freshman, Ellis Robinson. I'm going to play man. Hit one up the right sideline on me. That's what I would do if I was Georgia. I would try to get pressure and take a risk or two early in this game. And you know what? Sometimes you tip your hat if a guy makes a great throw. But I would go that route a little bit. Justin Yarborough, super chat. What are the comparisons to this game versus Alabama last year, other than it being a conference game?
It's a marquee game, game day, on site. Other than that, there's not a lot. And I know people, other than the brouhaha or the hoopla or whatever you want to call it, these are very different teams. Texas is more established now than they were just 13 months ago. No. Everybody would agree with that, right, Jerry? Yeah. I mean, more established. No. Georgia has a returning quarterback. Jalen Milroe, when Texas played them, was making only a second start, right? And so I think that these are two more polished teams, maybe, than what we saw at Alabama versus Texas. That would be my thought process on that, Justin. Just a tad different. Too many differences to really say they compare evenly or equally.
Yeah, I will add to that, and I totally agree. Recruiting wise, this is another level. So
you're the host, right?
Yeah, and because of what Texas did, winning at Bama last year, going to the playoff, beating Michigan, coming off the win over Oklahoma, which nationally that's not as big in recruiting as it is for the Texas and Oklahoma fan bases. But if Texas beats Georgia Saturday, they will have beaten Bama and Michigan on the road in Georgia. Are those not the 3 top programs in college football the last 4 years?
Yes. You could put Ohio State in there,
right?
potentially, maybe Clemson. But I think you're right.
That would be monumental. And that doesn't mean you get everybody. It's the NIL day and age, no chance. But what it does do, that just takes you to another level. I mean, you instantly become the school kids want to visit from all around the country. Texas would literally be able to get whoever they want on campus almost just to come see the place, just to come visit. That's the magnitude of this game in recruiting. And it goes, and these games are always, yes, it could help you close out 2025. Texas already leads for Michael Terry and Javian Hilson. And they're already right there in the fight for a number of other guys. But what it does in 26 and 27 and in the portal, if the magnitude of this in recruiting this is the biggest game Texas has had because of the games they've won before them, in my opinion. Let's see then. I'm trying to think of here. Let's see what our next question is.
Hey, Jerry, you want me to do a couple real quick?
Yeah, see any you see in there you like.
Yeah, absolutely. Aloha Travel. I don't think we mentioned this one at the outset.
We did.
We did that one. Okay,
we
got one. Let me see. Oh, this one from Nicholas. Did we talk about the stretch plays to the boundary early to tire him out? We talked about that one. How does Anthony Hill compare to Roquan Smith?
That's a good one.
Yeah, that's one we hadn't talked about. Roquan Smith, obviously the national champion linebacker for Georgia that went early in the NFL draft. Jerry, is Hill and Smith are both extremely physical, in my opinion. Yeah. Extremely physical. That's the thing. Yeah. Smith may be more instinctive as a linebacker. Hill may be more disruptive, in my opinion.
Yeah, so I think Roquan is so good in coverage. I think they're different players for sure, different body types, different body composition, different strengths as players. So I'm not sure how I would compare the two necessarily. I think they're just too different. I'm trying to think of a NFL linebacker to compare Anthony Hill to. I'd have to think about that one. I haven't really thought about that, but I saw both those guys a lot, obviously, in high school. Roquan Smith was so athletic. Roquan was that guy that he's not as good, but he kind of played a little bit like Derrick Johnson in high school. But he's different, not as big, not as good a player. I mean, he's a Pro Bowler, but Derrick Johnson may be like a gold jacket level guy, in my opinion. So a little bit different there. Jeff Carey's super chat. Hey, when do we start talking about the big game in 2 weeks? Let's get on the Vandy, Texas hype train. I got to tell you, man. Who does Vanderbilt have this week? Are they off?
Ball State.
Oh, yeah, that's right. They have Ball State. So Diego Pavia will be 18-21 if they can get up for Ball State. Can Vandy get up for Ball State anymore, Bobby, is the question. Coach Clark has to get his team up for Ball State before Texas comes in. But, yeah, look, and again, I'll say this because I know that after Georgia, let's just say Texas beats Georgia. Let's the if game. Will Texas be able to get up for Vandy? Absolutely, because of who Vandy's beat. Those days are over. If Vandy was 1-7, different conversation. This is Vandy that beat Alabama and won on the road at Kentucky. Nobody's overlooking Vandy anymore this season. The question is Vandy going to beat somebody else? Because they got Tennessee at the end of the season as well. But Texas will not overlook that game. No chance. All right, let's see. Bobby, Horns fan, $1.99 super chat. Thank you. Any plans to do tape breakdowns on the channel?
Well, we did one yesterday with Rod Babers. We don't do actual tape breakdowns, and that's because it's not actually licensed by the university. And so those channels will get shut down. And so we actually have credentialed. We are credentialed by the university as media. And so we are limited in what we can and can't do in that regard. Otherwise, we would love to do it, Horn fan. Don't think we wouldn't, because I love that stuff.
Breck, Bobby B, are you going to be in Nashville for Vandy? Yes, him and Jenny are going to have a tailgate at their house. I'll put the address on Twitter.
I am hosting a number of my college friends that weekend, so I'm excited about that.
Zane Petty, do we have a legit shot at Justice Terry? There's been a couple other living rent free asked about Justice Terry. We'll see. He's never been on campus before. Texas is going to give it their best shot, but I know a lot of people are saying, well, he's committed to USC. So, I mean, we'll see though. Texas is late to the party here. Not that they should have been early to the party in this recruitment, but getting him on campus is big. And then you have to see after this weekend where it really goes. It's a big boy recruitment. Let's just call it that. So we'll see on that. Okay, Ryan Nelson. Wow. We got to get one basketball question in because the AP poll came out today. Texas was ranked 19. If Bobby, Jerry, if we make the Sweet 16 this year, it'll be 6 tournament wins over the last 3 years, the best since 06, 08 in basketball. Absolutely will be. I watched Texas practice a couple of weeks ago. They're ranked 19. I know we're getting close to basketball season, so I wanted to answer this question. Texas is a much better roster than last year. Much better roster, the biggest guards they've had in a long time. It's all going to come down to with this team. Who are they going to play together, buy into roles? Is Arthur Kluma going to be fine with this role for some games and a scoring role in a different game? Is Jordan Pope or Julian Larry, one of those guys, okay with coming off the bench and being an integral part of a top 15 type team, potentially top 12 type team, potentially, if they maximize? Caden Shedrick looks a lot better this year. He's healthy, stronger, more confident. Kendall Weaver, tremendous player, energy player off the bench. I think Julian Larry, Jordan Pope, I think they have essentially 8 starters on this team, 8 starter level players. Devin Pryor's improved. We'll see if it carries over the games, how that could play into his role. But Texas has got a chance this year, but it's going to be a lot of this too will come down to, let's just say you're 2.5 minutes left in the game and you got to get a bucket and Trey Johnson's your guy. Are all the experienced guys going to defer to Trey Johnson? Those are the things that if you figure it out and it comes together, Texas has a shot to be really good. I mean, I'll say this. They're really good and they're picked 7th in the SEC. I think there was an initially – oh, thank goodness Texas out of the Big 12 in basketball. SEC at the top is better than the Big 12 this year. SEC is really, really good this year in basketball. Jeff Carey, Super Chat, 20 carries for Wisner, and we lost the baby Rhino.
I think talking about Jarrett Gibson, obviously there. Look, I don't know how many Wisner you want to really give him. I mean, I talked with that about that with Rod and some other folks, and you know, I think Wisner, you just want to give him 15 to 20 touches. You want to give Blue 10 to 15 touches. It's not about overrunning these guys. That they are limited because of their size somewhat. Hey, Jerry, this one from Osage the Destroyer. He says, late to the show, any movement in recruiting at this point for the Longhorns, Jerry?
Just this weekend's kind of where that's at. I think Texas is in a good spot with, Michael Terry and Javian Hilson still. I think they're in a good spot with some 2026 kids. Now, those kids, those recruitments, I don't think they're just going to end. I'm not out of the question. I'm talking your higher level guys. Those tend to go through the official visit process in June. That's kind of where the process is now. I think Texas is in a really good spot with a number of guys. I actually had an article on TexasFootball.com this morning about 7 guys Texas potentially does lead for, or I believe they may lead for. Does that mean all those guys are committing soon? No, it does not. Does it mean some might? Potentially. But I think Texas is in a really good spot in recruiting. They have a ton of momentum, as much momentum as they've had in a long time in recruiting. And for the 2025 class, if it's not a top 3 class, I'll be surprised right now. I think it has the ability to be a top 2 class if it maximizes. And I think 2026 is going well, as you'd expect. And again, if Texas happens to win Saturday, it just goes to another level, even than where it's at now. All right, Lane C. Wright, Super Chat. It seems like a lot of SEC teams get a cupcake in the second half of the season. Is there a reason ours are all at the beginning? I think just I just think it's team to team and kind of how your schedule sets up and who's actually good versus who's not. I think that's a part of it.
There's a little bit more to that, I think, because of Texas coming into the league like this, because you got to remember, a lot of these games are set up, 10, 15 years earlier. Texas had all of their games in the Big 12 sitting together at the end of their schedule and had all the preseason games lined up already. So Texas literally didn't have space for a late season game like that. They didn't do that. And so I think that's where Texas is a little bit different than these other SEC teams who have had the opportunity to do that. 5 years from now, as Chris Del Conte is able to schedule games out further and further, I think you might see a little bit of that lane, to your point. And I still don't think Texas is going to schedule a FCS team, by the way. That's something that Chris Del Conte is saying he will not do as long as he's at the University of Texas.
All right, so we had one I want to bring up here. It's interesting. We might have some Georgia fan in here. Is this Spiffy McGeezy a Georgia fan? I love Georgia fans come in. I don't see a path to Texas winning. Georgia's coming in on fire. Texas hasn't faced a top 100 offense. They haven't faced a good offense. We've been talking about this for the whole season. This is the first real offensive team, meaning real offensive team. Have a quarterback that'll play in the NFL, an offensive line with a bunch of NFL players, multiple running backs that not are just in between the tackle runners, but actually have speed and playmaking ability, true playmaking ability, multiple tight ends that'll play in the league, multiple receivers that'll play in the league. Georgia has that offense and is going to be the best offense Texas plays in the regular season. So my question, Bobby, is, the one thing that hadn't happened to Texas this year is they get down 2 scores in a game. They faced a little adversity against Oklahoma in that they had the turnovers, the really bad offensive quarter. So Oklahoma started on the plus Texas side of the field, then on the 49, their own 49 and a 37. So Oklahoma's first 3 possessions were about as good as Oklahoma could have scripted, except they'd only got 3 points. But Texas hasn't been down. They haven't got hit with a 67-yard slant route that goes to the house, and then you fumble the kickoff, and then they come right back and run one in from the 8-yard line on a counter and got down 14. They haven't had to react to that momentum, just overwhelming momentum adversity yet. We'll see if Georgia can provide that Saturday. But Georgia is going to score points on Texas. Georgia is a really good offensive team in terms of talent. If Georgia comes in and struggles, Bobby, then the Texas defense, I will say, is 1,000% legitimate because Georgia can score points.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I would say this. I mean, if you don't see a path for Texas winning, then you haven't been watching Texas. And you haven't been watching Georgia, because Georgia's laid some duds out there too. So just, Spiffy, I think you may want to think twice about that. The path for Texas to winning is having a good game for Quinn Ewers. I completely believe that is almost necessary for Texas to win this game. Then also the Texas defensive ends having some success in pass rush situations. And then I think it'll come down to turnovers and big plays. Ryan Wingo, Isaiah Bond, Jaden Blue, Trey Wisner, Gunnar Helm, those kind of guys are going to have to make big plays in this game, in my opinion.
I wanted the Ryan Nelson has a good one, because I totally agree with this. This will be the best O-line Georgia faces all year. Agree. They don't get pressure against us. We'll carve them up. I tend to agree with this, and that's kind of, I think, what Bobby was talking about earlier. What does Georgia do with Jalen Walker in this game? If they play him, if they start the game with him not in the middle, you'll know they didn't think they could get pressure without him being off the edge, and that would be interesting. There's been 4 or 5 games Texas offensive line needs to play at that Joe Moore Award level. It was Michigan, it was Oklahoma, check. It's Georgia. Maybe Kentucky. That may shift to Arkansas now, just because it's a road game, and then at A&M, because A&M's defensive front is really good. If Texas offensive line turns in a Michigan and OU level performance, then Texas is going to have receivers open against Georgia because their secondary is not as good as it has been.
I think if Quinn gets if he gets time, that's going to be the key. Now that he's back and gotten some action, we've seen that before where he kind of is timid upon a return. I think that he'll be better this time.
So we're going to end with this one tonight. Smartin won. I was told by my GA people the new Ugga won't come out of his doghouse. He might stay home. Well, don't show him the video. Don't show him the video. That's for sure. But all right, Bobby, kind of closing thoughts tonight. Texas 3.5-point favorite. Sark spoke today. Kirby spoke today. Derrick Williams out for the season. We don't know some specifics on Georgia injuries. Jared Wilson, the center, being a big one for me. But kind of your closing thoughts as we're at 5 days out is what's going to be an unbelievable atmosphere in Austin.
My closing thoughts are really, straightforward. Enjoy the win over OU. Love it. Great win. Even with a subpar performance on offense at times, Texas truly looked like a program going in the right direction, and OU looked like a program going in the wrong direction. So that has been decided. As we look towards Georgia, I think the biggest piece for me is bring your A game. I really believe that. The team, anything less than that will not be good enough for either team. And so let's see if Texas steps up. I mean, Sark has been pretty good in big games at Texas, especially the last couple of years. Let's see if he gives them hell again on Saturday night.
There you go. For Bobby Burton, I'm Jerry Hamilton. Thank you very much for joining Talkin' Ball on this Longhorn live stream tonight. We'll be back coffee and football Tuesday morning. We have recruiting breakdown. CJ and I will have that. CJ was out at Lovejoy this morning. We'll talk about all the recruiting going on, the visitors coming in for the UGA game. Just KJ Edwards, the running back from Carthage, actually hit me up during the show. He's coming in as well. So I had another guy, talented player to that list. And then we'll have more live stream tomorrow night, a couple other shows. So thank you very much for joining in. Thanks to John Donovan and Longhorn Wealth Management Group. Before we get out of here, John's a certified financial planner who spent over 30 years providing investment, retirement, insurance, and estate planning services and solutions to Longhorn families and friends across the country, coast to coast. John looks forward to celebrating the Longhorns' continued consensus #1 ranking with OTF fans at the tailgate this Saturday in Austin prior to the top 5 matchup between Texas and Georgia, and wants to offer a free 90-minute consultation to all OTF fans to explore how Longhorn Wealth can help you maximize your wealth, minimize your taxes, and secure your legacy. So simply call John and his team at Longhorn Wealth at 972-707-4900 or go online at www.longhornwealth.net to schedule your free consultation today. All right, guys, thanks for joining in. We'll talk to you in the morning. Coffee and football. Got a couple of guests in the morning lined up as well.
Hug 'em.